Hello everyone, and welcome back. Today we're taking a look at some of the most memorable moments from Friends, a sitcom that continues to entertain audiences decades after it first aired. What makes Friends special isn't just the comedy. It's the way the show combines hilarious situations with surprisingly emotional and relatable stories. The collection of scenes we're discussing today perfectly demonstrates why Friends became such a cultural phenomenon. Let's start with Ross and Rachel. Their relationship has always been one of the central storylines of the series. In these episodes, we see both the fun and the frustration that define their relationship. What begins with lighthearted conversations and awkward confessions eventually turns into one of the most famous relationship conflicts in television history. One of the funniest moments comes when Ross reveals his fantasy involving Princess Leia from Star Wars. The joke itself is funny, but what really makes the scene work is how uncomfortable and embarrassed Ross becomes when the conversation takes an unexpected turn. Friends was always great at turning ordinary conversations into comedy gold. Another standout storyline is the battle between Joey and Chandler over the chair. On paper, it's a ridiculous argument. Two grown men fighting over a chair shouldn't be that entertaining. Yet because of the chemistry between the characters, it becomes one of the funniest sequences in the series. Chandler wearing all of Joey's clothes while mocking him remains one of the most iconic visual gags in sitcom history. These moments highlight one of Friends' greatest strengths. The writers understood that comedy doesn't always require complicated setups. Sometimes all you need are great characters reacting to absurd situations. Monica's storyline is also surprisingly meaningful. After dealing with heartbreak, she throws herself into making jam. At first, it seems like a random hobby, but it gradually becomes clear that she's trying to fill an emotional void in her life. Eventually she realizes that what she truly wants isn't a successful jam business but a family of her own. This is one of the reasons Monica became such a beloved character. Beneath her perfectionism and competitiveness is someone who deeply values love, family, and connection. The Thanksgiving football game is another highlight. The so-called Geller Bowl perfectly captures the sibling rivalry between Ross and Monica. Even as adults, they become intensely competitive over a game that should be nothing more than a fun holiday activity. The comedy works because it feels real. Many viewers can relate to family members who suddenly become overly competitive during holiday games and gatherings. Then there's the classic ugly naked guy storyline. Only Friends could create an entire plot around a group of people trying to determine whether a neighbor is alive by poking him through a window with a long stick. The scene is absurd, ridiculous, and completely hilarious. It's the kind of humor that helped define the show's unique identity. However, the most important part of these episodes is undoubtedly the Ross and Rachel breakup storyline. This is where Friends shifts from pure comedy into emotional drama. Rachel becomes increasingly focused on her career, while Ross struggles with feelings of insecurity and jealousy. Neither character is entirely right, and neither character is entirely wrong. That's what makes the conflict feel authentic. When Rachel suggests that they take a break, both characters interpret those words differently. Rachel sees it as temporary space. Ross sees it as the end of the relationship. The misunderstanding leads to one of the most controversial moments in television history. Ross spends the night with another woman, believing the relationship is over. When Rachel discovers what happened, the damage is immediate and devastating. The argument that follows gave television one of its most famous lines. "We were on a break." Years later, fans still debate whether Ross was justified or whether Rachel had every right to feel betrayed. The fact that audiences continue discussing this storyline decades later is proof of how effective the writing was. What makes this conflict so memorable isn't the technical question of who was right. It's the emotional reality behind it. Relationships often fail because two people experience the same event in completely different ways. That's exactly what happened here. Overall, these episodes showcase everything that made Friends successful. The comedy is sharp, the characters are lovable, and the emotional moments feel genuine. Whether it's Joey and Chandler acting like children, Monica searching for purpose, or Ross and Rachel navigating heartbreak, every storyline contributes something memorable. Even after all these